in the last presentation, we went to Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and we looked at time prophecy, which wasn't really a time prophecy, but it contains time prophecies within it, that Jesus gave to his disciples. And it began in AD 31 and stretched all the way to 1844. And we saw that it was divided into these three sections, and at the very end of the chapter, as you go into Matthew 25 verse 1, it says, "Then, at this time, when all these things are being fulfilled, and this generation hasn't passed, the kingdom of heaven, which is the church, appears in the form of 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins." He then mentioned the symbology of these two classes in a number of different passages. And does anybody remember a couple of those different symbols that we looked at? So we got the 5 wise and the 5 foolish. Can anybody remember another one?
Yeah.
Do it in the tens.
Wise and foolish.
Sorry? The precious and the vile. So the precious and vile was Jeremiah chapter 15. So we had the precious and the vile. We had the wheat and the tares. And we had the net, the good fish and the bad fish, Matthew 13. So we saw that the church is symbolized by these two groups. And then we said that when we looked at Mark 13, verse, what's it saying in your notes?
26 to 27.
Verse 26 and 27. We looked at Mark 13, and we also looked, where else did we look?
Daniel 11:40.
We looked at Daniel 11:40, but it was related to this.
Matthew.
Yes, Matthew.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
It was in Matthew.
Matthew 13.
Matthew 13.
Verse 24.
Matthew 13, verse 24, which is the fish. It says, "Then the angels are going to do what? They're going to separate the good fish and the bad fish." It says in Mark 13:27, "Then the angels are going to gather together the elect." So you see in these two chapters that we looked at, Matthew 13, Mark 13, that there's a separation process. And the people who do that separation process are angels. And I said that you have Christ, His Holy Spirit, a message, and messengers of God's people, which was the point that Brother Patrick brought up, which was, and the common thread between all of those three was what?
Seed.
The seed. Remember he said the seed is Christ, it's His word, and it's His people. And then we went to Revelation. We didn't actually go in there, but we mentioned it a number of times, Revelation 14, because Revelation 14 speaks of angels. And what's the definition of an angel? The definition of an angel is just a messenger. So we know it's a messenger, and we're suggesting that these angels of Revelation 14 are people. They're the messengers who have a message that's given by Christ through the Holy Spirit. Now, we're not just saying that these angels are human beings, messengers. We're in agreement with the Spirit of Prophecy. The Spirit of Prophecy teaches that they're not real angels. They're not literal angels, but they're symbolic of people. And so when we go to those two verses that we looked at in Matthew 13, Mark 13, and it says the angels are going to do this work of separation, we're saying that those angels that are being referred to are the angels of Revelation 14, 6 to 11, which are human beings that have a message, and it's this message that's going to do this separation. Depending on how you respond to this message determines whether or not you're going to be wise or whether or not you're going to be foolish. So that's what we spoke about. And then we said, well, what is the message? And I brought you back to the point that the message is related to the 2520, the daily, and the work of radical Islam at the end of the world. Now, these are three prophecies that the church rejects today. It's rejected those three truths for a long time now. And that's one way of expressing this message. Another way of expressing this message, if you remember, we also went to Daniel 11, verses 40 to 45. Remember we spoke about verse 40 to 45? And I split the verse up into two sections, part B and part A. And I said 40 part A, from verse 1 all the way down to 40 part A. And then we had part B all the way down to 45. And we didn't read the Spirit of Prophecy quote, but we will. That Ellen White says that this history here will be repeated. And she specifically quotes from which verses? Remember which verses we said?
31 and 36.
30.
That's right, 30 to 36.
30 is on the ships of Shittim.
Yep. She quotes from verse 30 to verse 36. And we read verse 31 because verse 31 has the issue of the daily in there. So you know the subject of the daily is going to be repeated at the end of the world. And when you run through that logic, it becomes indefensible to suggest that the daily is Christ's ministration. It just doesn't work when you see this relationship between these verses and the ones that follow it. And she says that these events here are portraying the final events of Earth's history. So when we talk about the message, it's dealing with these histories here, but in its most concise and self-supporting or self-standing message, it's essentially Daniel 11 verses 40 to 45. So there's this message here, and it has these components that are attached to it, which we need to grapple with. So straight away, people are probably, maybe yourselves, are starting to think, well, I thought it was only these three, and now it's this, and this is 6 verses, and there's a lot of information in those 6 verses, and how many more pieces of information, and it just becomes an information overload, and it just explodes. So we want to try and keep things very, very simple as we go through our presentations. But my definition of simple may not be your definition of simple. And I do appreciate that. I really do. We shouldn't be surprised. You know, if you want to get anywhere in life, in your secular life, you know you have to pay a price for that. You have to go through some kind of course of study. If you want to get to become a nurse or any kind of professional, you know it's going to cost you a lot of time, energy and effort, and you have to apply yourself. Even if you're in a job that uses your hands, that you don't use, you know, it's not a brain intensive work that you do. You may be a plumber or electrician. You still have to go through qualifications. You still need to know a lot, and you need to memorize a lot. So there's a lot of effort in any kind of profession, and we're saying that it's exactly the same in our religious life. I don't know why, but some people think religion is free, but it really doesn't teach that in the scriptures. It's a misnomer that religion is free. It costs you everything, in fact. If you want to buy the pearl of great price, how much does it cost? It costs everything that you have, and that is your time and your energy and your effort. You have to pay a lot, and part of that payment is an intellectual payment that you have to make. You have to be willing to spend time and make an effort to stretch your brain to comprehend these things, because there's a lot of information.
Look what it cost Jesus.
Look what it cost Jesus. Yeah, quite. So when it comes to Daniel 11, 40 to 45, there are many things, as I say, that in those verses, but there are 2 key verses that we're going to spend a lot of time on, and they are going to be verses 40 and 41. They're the ones that are dealt with in a lot of detail. And this history here, remember, verses 40 to 45, it says it's going to be repeated in this history here. And so that we are clear on this issue, verses 30 to 36 are dealing with the rise of the papacy. So if you want to know how the papacy is going to arise at the end of the world, then all you need to do is look at this history and see how it arose the first time. And that's going to teach you how it's going to rise the second time. So that's a quick review of what we spoke about this morning. So I'm going to erase a fair bit of this off, and we're just going to move on in our studies. When we spoke about radical Islam, remember, we said that we're already now in the throes of the third jihad, we're in the Third World War, and our church is teaching that this is a distraction and we should not lose our focus of spreading the gospel message to the world by thinking or commenting or investigating the work of Islam. And we stand in opposition to that understanding, because we teach that the very heart of the sign that each and every one of us needs to understand is the work of radical Islam. There's just one more point I want to put in place when it comes to this everlasting gospel. So let's we looked, did you, I can't remember if we actually read the verses. Did you read John 16 verse 8 with Brother Patrick?
Read it, but I refer to it.
Yeah, so let's go read that. I thought we hadn't read it. Let's go back and read John chapter 16 verse 8. When Christ came to earth, he identified himself as the Comforter. And by the time we get to John chapter 16, Christ is soon to be crucified, and before that happens, he's going to prepare his disciples for that event. So we'll pick up from verse 5. It's verse 8 that we want. Verse 8 is the verse that we're going to look at, but we're going to begin in verse 5. But now I go my way to him that sent me, and none of you asketh me, whither goest thou? But because I have said these things unto you, sorrow hath filled your heart. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth, it is expedient for you that I go away, for if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. But if I depart, I will send him unto you. So Christ is about to leave, and he says, when I leave, I'm going to send the Comforter to you. And verse 8 is the verse that we want to talk of. And when he is come, he, the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, we're not going to read the verses, but if you follow through from verse 9 onward, it tells you that this is indeed the Holy Spirit. Verse 13 explains that. And when he is come, he will reprove the world of sin, and of righteousness, and of judgment. So here you have these three steps: sin, righteousness, and judgment. And Brother Patrick took you to another verse, which was Acts chapter 24, verses 25. And this is when Paul is speaking to Felix. And as my sister correctly identified, it says temperance, righteousness, and judgment. So there are many ways to express these three steps, but this is the work of the Holy Spirit. And we know that Paul is an apostle, he's a messenger from God, and whatever message he's going to give is going to be given through the working of the Holy Spirit, so he must be saying the same thing. So this is the three steps of the work of the Holy Spirit. Let's turn to Revelation 14. Let's just put one more piece of information in place, and then we'll make some comment on this. Pick up from verse 6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel. So this three steps from Revelation 14 is the work of the Holy Spirit. And it's the everlasting gospel. Patrick took you to Genesis chapter 3:15 this morning, and it's this thing that we want to be really clear on, the fact that it's everlasting. It's been there from the beginning right to the end, and it hasn't changed. But there is something that has changed, and what's changed is the words. The words change as you go through history. So if you were to read the words that are given in Genesis, those words, that gospel message is the same gospel message, but the words are different to the words that are given here in Revelation 14. And if we were to go to Millerite history, you'd see that some of the words were different there. So the words change as you go through history. And we want to be clear on that. And it causes Adventist problems, because we want to have this fixed terminology of what the gospel is, and we're not comfortable with the fact that it changes. And part of the reason why we're not comfortable is because some of the language becomes offensive to certain people, and it's this offence that's being caused that causes people to retract and brace themselves and not accept that this image, whatever this story is a representation or a symbol of the everlasting gospel. So people draw away from that, and where everybody seems to congregate is around the gospel. So we all centre our message around the gospels, and the language that's used there is very soft and very gentle, and we feel very comfortable to give those words of a gospel message, but we feel very uncomfortable to give the words of Revelation 14 to use it. But it's the same gospel. I want us to understand that point. So in Revelation 14, we read the first part of verse 6, and all the rest of verse 6 basically says that this message is going to be given to all the world, and this is what's going to be given. So it says, verse 6, having the everlasting gospel. This angel has the everlasting gospel, and he's going to preach to everybody. And then verse 7 tells you what he says. So if verse 6 says he's got the everlasting gospel, and verse 7 says this is what he says, then you know those words in verse 7 are the everlasting gospel. Hopefully we can see the connection between the two verses. He has a message to preach to the whole world, and this is what he's going to say in verse 7. Saying with a loud voice, let's count these together. Fear God, 1. Give glory to him, 2. For the hour of his judgment is come, 3. So there's these 3 steps that's given, and then you're supposed to worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea, and the 4 fountains of the waters. But it's those 3 steps that we want to pick up. And what's the last one? Judgment. So you know, if it's dealing with judgment here, that we're back on the same territory as John 16, Acts 24, because they're both ending in judgment. So here we are in Revelation 14. You may have noticed something. We've just read verses 6 and 7. If we just drop to verse 8, it says, and there followed another angel. And if you drop to verse 9, it says, and the 3rd angel. Everybody see that? So if verse 9 is the 3rd angel, then it says verse 8 was another angel. That must be the 2nd. And if you go back to verse 6 and 7, it's the 1st angel that's speaking. So you know verses 6 and 7 are the 1st angel's message. Can we see those 3 angels being portrayed there? So let's just go to verse 9. It says, and the 3rd angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever. And they have no rest day nor night, nor who worship the beast or his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. So you can see from verses 9 to 11, which is the 3rd angel's message, this is the punishment that you're going to get if you've received the mark of the beast. We understand that? Is that how we all see those verses? So you've received your punishment or your judgment. So you know that here you have judgment, and it says that it was the 3rd step or the 3rd message. And if that was the third step or the third message, we'll drop back to verse 8. It says, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So that's the second message. It's the second angel's message. And I'm going to put number 2 here. And I'm going to put the word fallen. So in John chapter 16 verse 8, what was the second message or the second step? Righteousness. And Acts 24:25, righteousness. But in Revelation 14 the word is different now. It's talking about fallen. But it's still the second step. It's still the second angel. Let's just drop back to verses 6 and 7. Verses 6 and 7 are the first angel's message. So here's the first angel's message in verse 6 and 7. And what does it say in verse 7? What are the words of the first angel? Fear God, give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come. So here you've got 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. And the third one is judgment. So we know we're on track because we're picking up judgment all the way through at the third step. And it says, fear God, and the second step is give him glory. So if you glorify God, let's just work through that quickly. The glory of God is his character. It's who he is or what he's like, what kind of a person he is, his character, his thoughts and his feelings. In fact, Ellen White says that moral character is the combination of our thoughts and our feelings. So our thoughts and our feelings, which is our character, is the glory of God. And if I were to say to you that your thoughts were wrong, would you be doing sin? If I said you had wrong thoughts. Yeah, so we know that if they're wrong, you would be doing sin. And if I said you had bad feelings, you had lust or anger, and they were bad, they were wrong, we'd say that was sin as well, yes?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you had right thoughts and right feelings? That would be good. That would mean you're not doing any sin. You're thinking good things and you're feeling good things. So you can see that when we talk about glory, which is character, which is your thoughts and feelings, it's all about whether they're wrong or whether they're right. So here, where it says, fear God, give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, this word glory is just another way of expressing being right. Because that's what righteousness is. It just means not being wrong. So here we have judgment, that matches up, righteousness, that matches up, and fear God. So why would you fear God? Because of your sin. Because you're not right. There's something in you that when you're confronted and you see God, you know there's something wrong, and so you have a fear of who God is. So you see that this fear God is just another way of expressing sin. It's to convict you of sin. And as my sister rightly pointed out this morning, temperance, what's temperance to do with? If we want to take it at its most basic level, it's what you eat. Self-control. Yes, in many things, it's not just on what you eat. On the most simple level, we always focus about what you eat. You know, are you going to be temperate in what you eat? And if you're intemperate, if you're not following a health plan, or you live intemperately, you don't sleep, or you overwork, or you whatever you do, you know you're doing something wrong. It's wrong to be intemperate. If you're wrong, you're sinning. So you see that this word temperate is just a synonym of sinning, which is a synonym of fearing God. So you've got sin, righteousness and judgment. It's the same situation, same message. But what I want us to see is when it says fear God, give him glory, for the hour of his judgment is come, this is all the first angel's message.
Mm.
The first angel's message has every single component of the everlasting gospel contained within it. We may sort of say, yes, we can see that, but it's something that the vast majority of people would never have noticed or don't recognise or don't even understand the implications of. And I'm not saying we're going to make great play on that during this week, but it's an important thing, a concept for us to understand, that this gospel message here at its very beginning has got all the components of the everlasting gospel all contained within it. This is the most important step, this first step. That's right.
Seed.
That's the characteristics of a seed.
Amen. And it's an important thing for us to see that. So, we've got sin, righteousness and judgment, the first, second and third step. What I want to just point out, you've already seen it, but I haven't highlighted the fact and drawn your attention to it, even though you can see that's what I'm pointing to here. The reason why we don't like the everlasting gospel in the book of Revelation, but we like it in the book of John, is because it deals with these nice words here of righteousness. And we can cope with glory pretty well, but it's this one that causes us heartache, fallen. Because how are we going to reconcile the fact that this says fallen and this says be righteous?
Mm. Yeah, opposite.
They're complete opposites. But we're saying, in agreement with what the Bible teaches, that this is the everlasting gospel. But we're also saying that this is the everlasting gospel. So, if they're both the everlasting gospel and we've got this contradiction, how do you reconcile the contradiction? That one message is saying you start off as a sinner and you go from bad to worse. And this one says you start off as a sinner and you go from bad to good. So we're going from bad to good, and then we're going from bad to worse. So you got the point. The whole point that you can see here is when you put these passages together, it shows you that the everlasting gospel, everybody starts off bad. Everybody's in the same position. If I were to ask you, two brothers, Cain and Abel, who was the good one and who was the bad one? You know, often people say Abel was good and Cain was bad. But we want to see that they were both bad. They're both bad. They're both in trouble. They've got problems with God. One becomes good and one becomes worse. He exhibits righteousness and he exhibits sin, and he ends up killing his brother, as we both know. And what happens at the end? They're both going to be judged. One's going to be judged to everlasting life and one to eternal death. So this idea of the everlasting gospel being just this message of righteousness, that everybody's going to be saved, and if you get on track it's all going to be okay, is not the everlasting gospel that the scriptures teach. The scriptures teach a gospel that produces two groups of people, which is the wise and the foolish. So we had the wise and the foolish, the wheat and the tares, the precious and the vile, the good and the bad fish, and now we've got people who are righteous and people who are fallen. And what becomes extremely offensive is that the people who are identified as being fallen, it identifies them as being Babylon. And who wants to call anybody Babylon? You know, it's an offensive term today. So we try and avoid using this kind of rhetoric, and we stick to passages from John and the other Gospels when we think about this gospel message. In fact, often we don't even realise that it's these three steps, and it is. It clearly identifies it as the 3 steps here. Having the everlasting gospel, saying, fear God, give him glory for the hour of his judgment is come. It's 3 steps. It defines the everlasting gospel. 3 steps. And these 3 steps is what we want to understand. That it's always going to be 3 steps. Whenever you look at any group or class of people that are going to go from a position of what? Being bad to deciding whether they're going to be good or worse or get worse, and then they're going to be judged. So this process that you start bad and you end up being judged, which is the whole theme of the scriptures, all it's doing is giving story after story that show you this pattern so that we can get it really clear in our minds how this relationship between ourselves and God works and how things are going to occur at the end of the world. Because we're not just saying it's 3 steps in some kind of random fashion. They're very specific steps, and we're going to show you what the specific steps are and the template. You know, we've just shown you, remember this house that we built? These 3 steps, this line of judgment, where these are lines of, what were these lines of, the vertical ones? Sorry? They're the plummet,
Yeah.
and it says
The,
righteousness. Remember we said that? We read that in Isaiah 28, yeah? And this was the line of judgment, the tape measure, and this is the plummet of righteousness. So these are marking historical events where people are exhibiting righteousness. But righteousness is the second step here. Remember, this is righteousness. First they're going to be identified as sinners, and then they're going to come to judgment. But what do you know is going to happen in this history? From what we've learned here. You're going to get 2 groups. And a certain class of people are not going to exhibit righteousness. They're going to exhibit the characteristics of Babylon. Or should I say, the characteristics of Cain. They're going to be in rebellion to God. They're going to disobey God. And more often than not, when you disobey God, what do you end up doing? You turn against your brethren. So that's a characteristic that you identify. They turn against their brethren. And you're going to see that in a number of different classes. Sometimes they may not be your brethren. Sometimes they may be your next door neighbour, or people that you live around, your society, the townsfolk. It doesn't have to literally be your brethren. They don't have to all be in the church. It could be 2 groups. It could be one nation and another nation. So you have different dynamics, but you're always going to see these 2 classes being created. So when we think about the everlasting gospel, we want to see that it's 3 steps all the time. Every time I give you 3 examples, but there are many, many more examples. The reason why we focus on Revelation 14 is because this is the template that's given to us at the end of the world. We're going to identify that this is going to line up with Daniel 11 verse 40. This is the time of the end, and it lines up with the year 1798. So this is why we focus on Revelation 14. It produces these 2 classes, the good people and those who become worse, even though everybody starts in the same position. And one last bit that we went through in our last presentation, God's people have been taken into Babylon for 1260 years, and then they come out of Babylon, and here's Sardis, and this kingdom of heaven, this church, parable of the 10 virgins, is being identified as the Protestant churches of the United States. This is during the time period of the period from 1798 to 1844, Millerite history. And how many years was this, do you remember?
46.
46 years, remember, this is 46 years. So, is everybody reasonably happy with this church coming out? The focus here about the parable of the 10 virgins, 2 classes, and how 2 classes are created. 2 classes are created by this everlasting gospel message. And depending on how you respond to it, depending on how you're going to respond to the messages of Daniel 11 verses 40 to 45, or how you're going to respond to the issue of the 2520, or what other one? The daily, and the other one? Islam. How you're going to respond to these issues will determine which side of the line you're going to be on, whether you're going to be on this side or on this side. And all of this information is not being given by some mysterious, mystical being. They're human beings, flesh and blood, are being used by Christ through the work of the Holy Spirit, who have been given a message. And where was this message even found? Where is this message? Revelation 14, verses 6 to 11. That's where this message is. It's this everlasting gospel message. But it looks different as you go through history. It always looks different. And that's what people become confused on. So you have to juggle two things in your hands. The first one is this consistency. It's a constant message. It's an everlasting gospel. The same message. How many steps? 3 steps. All the time, always. You can grasp that. But then you have to juggle that it looks different as you run through history. So sometimes the wording's this, and sometimes the wording's that. Sometimes the imagery is about nets and fishes. Sometimes it's about fields. Sometimes it's about people who have been besieged or barricaded within Jerusalem. It can be many, many different stories, many, many different images. But when you can grasp these two things and conceptualize them, then you can begin to understand the power of this message and the ability that it gives you to understand end-time prophecy, which is the whole purpose and the whole goal. So I was speaking to a friend of mine recently, and they were saying, "Oh, that's all looks good. I understand all of that. Well, some of it. But what's the point of your message?" And I thought, "Oh, I've done all that, and I didn't even understand the point." So I felt quite deflated when I said that. I didn't even get the point of it. I didn't do very well. So I want to correct myself and tell you what the point is. So let's go with the point. Maybe it was a bit premature to ask the question. Hopefully everybody understands where our focus is. Our focus is on all these things shall be fulfilled. The very last portion of this prophecy that given by Christ, typified by the parable of the 10 virgins and all of these other parables that show you 2 classes of people. And it's all predicated on Revelation 14. 3 steps of the everlasting gospel. Produces 2 classes of people. Doesn't just identify them. We want you to understand it's the message itself that produces it. Because everybody is in the same situation. Depending on how you respond to the message determines whether you're going to be good or get really bad and fall away. So I want us to be clear on that point. That it's not just if you said I agree with it that you're going to be right, and I disagree I'm going to be wrong. That it's something that you can do independent. When that message comes to you, it has a mysterious thing of being able to change you in the way that you interact with it. So let me check if I want to say anything more. Okay, that's all okay there.
Great is the mystery of godliness.
It is the mystery of godliness. That's exactly what it is. There's one more point I want to make. I've given this story, and I've said the theme of the story of this gospel message was what? The construction of a house, which is a temple. So we've given this imagery here, and it's a correct imagery. But there are many different images, many different symbols that we can use to describe this story. And we're describing the story, remember, of the history of the Millerites. So the history of the Millerites can be described as the construction of a temple or a building. But let's go to Matthew 25. We don't have to turn there because we're all familiar with the story. Now, is that a story about any temples or houses or buildings being built? It's not, is it? What's the story of the parable of the 10 virgins about? What's the theme of that whole story?
Readiness.
So it's wise and the foolish. Not the point of the story, but the background. What's it all built upon? What are they waiting for? Wedding. They're waiting for a bride and a bridegroom. So that's a story of a wedding. So that should give you a clue. So when you do your studies and you want to understand what's happening at the end of the world, two things that you should be looking for. Search out stories that have got to do with marriages, because any story that's got to do with marriages is going to tell you what? About what's happening at the end of the world. Search out stories about building temples, building buildings, because what's that going to teach you? Something about what's going to happen at the end of the world. Now, we have to be careful about this in today's climate. Who gets married? Okay, you understand what I meant there? Who gets married? Okay, marriage is in the Bible. Let me put it that way. In the Bible, so we don't tread on anybody's toes. It's dealing with men and women getting married, especially when it comes to the parable of the 10 virgins. It's the bride and the bridegroom. It's the men and women. And in that story, who's the bridegroom? Jesus. So I'll put a symbol of a cross for Jesus. And who is his bride?
Church.
Are we okay with that? This is the church. I heard someone say the 144,000, but maybe we could talk about that later. So this is dealing with the marriage between Christ and his church. And when we spoke about this building, who are all these stones? It's us, yeah. The Bible says that we're lively stones or living stones. It's a living temple. And what is this temple built on?
Jesus.
On a foundation? You build a temple. You build a building on a foundation, and we read that already. And who's that foundation? Jesus. Yeah, he's the chief cornerstone. In fact, it says the apostles are the foundation. He's the chief cornerstone, or the corner foundation stone. So you can see how this temple is built up systematically, first with Christ, then the disciples, then you and I. So there are these different symbols that are used to describe the construction or the building of a church. And what church is this one? If this is Millerite history from 1798 to 1844, what church did we say this was? Sardis. This is Sardis. And what does Sardis mean?
Coming out. Or how long?
How long? I like that. It means to come out. And where they're coming out of? Babylon. They're coming out of Babylon, and this church is going to be built.
That's right.
So a problem that we're going to be facing is this is the everlasting gospel. 1, 2, 3. And how many classes are going to be produced? 2 classes. But we're talking about a church that's being built. So the church that's being built, what would the second step? What would you identify them as? If they're being built. What are the 2 words we've got for the second step? Righteousness or fallen. Remember, Babylon is fallen.
So righteous.
So this church that's being built is going to be the group that's going to be righteous.
Yeah, it's going up, not.
It's going up. So what else are you expecting to see in this history? What you have to see destruction of what? Because this is a story about a
church.
Story about a church. So you have to see a destruction of a what?
Church.
You have to see a destruction of a church, and you have to see the building of a church. Okay, so that's our church model. Now let's go to the wedding model. So what do you have to see in this history? What do you have to, so we've got a man and a woman marrying,
Yeah.
and the man is Christ, and the woman is.
Church.
So you're going to see Christ is going to do what? Marry his church. But there's 2 groups, remember? So he's going to marry his church. What must he be doing to the other group?
Shut the door.
In the language of marriage. Divorce.
Yeah.
So you have to see a marriage and a divorce at the same time. So we've described all of that, and you've come a long way. You've come a long way in your understanding of what the everlasting gospel looks like and how it operates. And all we've done is just gone through 1798 to 1844 Millerite history, which we haven't even gone into any of the details about, and you don't need to know those details at this level. But all I've given you is the symbol of a temple being built, which we're all comfortable with. We haven't gone to the verses, but they're so plain. We all know that a temple is a symbol of a church. We all know that. You know, the whole purpose of Solomon's temple, where the Shekinah glory sits in that temple, was a symbolic representation of the Holy Spirit sitting in our hearts. Everybody knows that. And we know the story of the wedding. It tells you the parable of the 10 virgins. You know, over and over again, the Bible talks about Christ wanting to marry his church. There are many, many stories about that. The whole book of the Song of Solomon is that story. That love affair between Christ and his church. Often we don't talk about Song of Solomon, but it's an interesting book. It's a very good book. And we've just used those two symbols, the wedding and the church, and we've used the knowledge that we've just learned about the everlasting gospel that produces, the gospel itself produces the two classes of people. Because there were only one class before. And what condition was that one class in? Bad. They were bad people. Everybody starts bad. And then this gospel message is going to produce two groups of people. And it's going to be a message. Not some emotion, not some feeling, not some prayer session, not prayer warriors. This is some kind of message that's going to come to you through angels, symbolic angels, through human messengers. And when they give this message, they will produce two classes of people. And in the language that we've just spoken, here, this is the building that's going to be constructed. So you know that there's a construction of a church. This is the church of Sardis as it gets constructed. The church that came out, but there's going to be a church that falls. So what you want to see as 1798 to 1844 is discussed in greater detail. Look out for a church that's being built and a church that's being destroyed. And they're going to happen one after another or at the same time. Why do they have to be at the same time? Because where do you see the building and the construction or the righteousness and the fall? Where do you see that? At what step? Second step. So it has to be at the second step. So they have to happen at the same time. Because by the time you get to here, what's happened? It's all finished. And you're starting off bad. So it can't be here because you're all bad. Here you're all judged. So it has to happen somewhere in here that one group is going to be built and one group is going to be destroyed. So you need to see that in that history. Then we talk about the wedding. Christ came and found you and I as this worthless baby in the desert, dying, came and cleaned us up, put us on our feet, fed and clothed us, and when we came of age, what did he want to do? He wanted to marry us. Would Christ... Are we allowed to commit adultery? Can Christ commit adultery? Okay, so what's the definition of adultery? It's when a man and a woman come together illegally. So, here's this young woman, you or I, because we're all women, aren't we? Because we're in a church, yeah, we're all women. We were born, left in the wilderness to die, and he nurtured us, took care of us, and we grew up, and we became mature, ready to be married. And here he comes to marry us. And one group are all ready. Here we are. We're all looking beautiful and nice. And he looks at us and he says, I'm going to marry you. And there's this other woman, and when he looks at her fingers, he notices something on her finger. He notices a ring that one of her lovers gave her. Not a wedding ring. And she's got jewellery. She's decked with jewellery. She's got a nice dress. And he comes and looks at her and he says, where did you get all this from? So who gave her all of this stuff? Another man. But she's a church, remember. So here's a church. And some man has given her all this jewellery. And so Christ is going to say, no way, we're not going to get married. And all my intentions for you are not going to happen. And we're going to separate. So you see these two images of a marriage and a church being built are all contained in this story of the everlasting gospel. So you're going to see this over and over again. Hopefully they're simple stories for you to see, and they can begin to make sense to you. Who knows anything about the book of Ruth? A little bit. You don't need to know a lot. Ruth, was she a Jew or not?
Moabite.
She was a Moabite. Okay, so everybody knows she was a Moabite.
Yeah.
Okay, and who's she going to marry?
Oh, Boaz.
Boaz. So
Boaz, yeah.
what's that the story of? A marriage.
Yes.
So if it's a marriage, what do you know that's a story about? You know it's a story about the everlasting gospel. So what you should be doing is when you go into the book of Ruth, he's not thinking this is some kind of children's story or a love story about emotions and what a kind man he was and what a good daughter-in-law is. You know, so we should say, we should all be good daughter-in-laws, or we should all be good mother-in-laws, or we should be all good son-in-laws. That's not the story of the book of Ruth. The story of the book of Ruth is a story about the everlasting gospel when a woman or a church marries Christ. Now there's lots of intricacies in the book of Ruth, but you have to get that. Otherwise the book of Ruth doesn't make any sense. The book of Esther. Does anyone know about the book of Esther?
Yes.
What's the book of Esther about? Same story.
Yeah.
Now it's intrigue though, because now you've got adultery going on in the book of Esther, haven't you? Because you've got two women marrying one man. In fact, one of them's already married, and she's going to do what? What's going to happen to her? The first wife. Divorce. So if he's divorcing her, what kind of woman is she? Well, the second message,
Fallen.
fallen. So she's a foolish woman, foolish virgin, she's fallen. And then he's going to marry another one, Esther, so he marries her, so what must she be?
Righteous.
Righteous. So you can see straight away that the book of Esther is not this love story between some Persian king and some beautiful Jewess. This is a story about a church being divorced from God and a church is being married to God. And when is that happening? Both at the same time. They're both happening at the same time. So these are recurring themes that we want to see. And we haven't gone into any detail on any of this, but hopefully you can see these aren't conceptually, they're easy to understand, aren't they? When you can see what the imagery means, what the 3 steps are, and what number 2 does. When you compare John 16 and Revelation 14, when you compare them, that it's going to produce 2 groups, and it's the message that does that. And these are repeating stories over and over again that teach you the same thing, that there's this building that's going to be destroyed or built, or there's this marriage that's going to happen, and separation and divorce of these people coming together. Okay. Now, we could start our story all the way back to the time of Adam. So, let's do our line of judgment. And here's our plummet. So here's Adam, and Adam has just sinned. Genesis 3:15. Everything's gone bad. And what's the promise for Adam? That there's going to be a seed, and that seed is Christ. So there's going to be a saviour. So here he has a message of a saviour, and what kind of message is this? This is the everlasting gospel. And when his son was born, what did he think had happened?
That the seed was born.
And what was the son's name? Cain. When Cain was born, he said, "Oh, that was quick. I didn't think it was going to be that quick." Maybe he did, I don't know. But he thought, the saviour's here. Here's my seed. And it all went badly wrong. I mean, really badly wrong. So, he has his son, Then he has his second son, and his second son dies, and he has his third son, and it goes on and on. He has many, many sons, and he gets to the end of his life, around 900 years later, and he dies. And there's a saviour come. And then they have more and more generations, and everybody's saying the same thing. What they're all saying? The saviour's coming. Sometime. Pie in the sky. By and by. And nobody knows when it's going to happen. So you run all the way through the history, and then we get to the time of, let's go to Daniel. So here we are in the time of Daniel. And Daniel's full of time prophecies. That's good news. Yeah, you know, that gives us something to bite into, give our teeth into. So all the messages of Daniel, which have got to do with time. When we talk about time, what is the time connected to? What's it dealing with? What's the subject matter? Because the subject matter isn't time, is it? What's the subject matter?
When?
So it's when, but what is the message that's being dealt with? It's, remember, we're dealing with the everlasting gospel. So what must Daniel be dealing with? The gospel.
The 3 steps.
So he's dealing with the gospel because he's everlasting, and now he's going to put some time to it. Okay, now he's going to put some time to it. And what's the crux of his time? He gives a lot of time piece of information, but I'm thinking about Daniel chapter 9. So here we are in Daniel chapter 9, and Daniel chapter 9 is the 70 weeks. Is everybody reasonably familiar with the 70-week time prophecy? Some people say, yeah, I'm going to quiz you. You should say yes. Okay, so we're going to start from the year 457 BC. And we're going to go 7. I got this wrong last time. And the Patrick had to straighten me out. And 1. That's 70 weeks. That's 70 weeks, isn't it? Is that right? Yeah. 762?
Yeah.
Tell me it's good. I'm good. I got it wrong last time.
I don't remember.
So here we are. We're in the 70th week, and this is the time of Christ, and it's going to end in the year 34 AD, and it's going to begin what year? We have the same people on 3.
0 BC.
27.
Which year?
27.
It's not 0. The problem with all time prophecies is not the length or the ending, it's the start. And for some reason, it's a consistent problem with God's people. They don't understand where it starts. And so the Jews had the same problem. They some reason or another, they didn't quite click where to put the start. And so some of them thought it was 0 BC, and some thought it was something else, and there was a lot of confusion about when it was. But today we know it was actually 457. When you calculate that out, it comes to 27 AD. But the point I want to pick up is that here's this Saviour who's going to come and save his people. And here Daniel is going to give a time for the everlasting gospel. And here's Christ, the time of Christ. So what we've got is this pattern that you've got a message about a Saviour, and it has no time. And then sometime you're going to get another message that tells you when. And that when is going to give you the information about the everlasting gospel right here. Does that make sense? It's the same message. The everlasting gospel is that Christ is going to come and save you. It's given with no time attached. Nobody knows when it's going to happen. And for millennia, people keep on saying, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then suddenly a prophet comes and he tells you when it's going to happen. And then if you track properly, it takes you to the very time. There you are. Christ has come. Now, there was one in here that I didn't do, which I could have done, which was... Who would that be? This was Moses. Because Moses has a really nice time prophecy and a lot of information attached to him. So you could have even done the story of Noah, because it would have given the same thing. So here's Moses, and he had this saviour, because Moses is the saviour, isn't he? He's going to come and save his people, and there's this time prophecy that's given here. Do you know who the time prophet is? The prophet who gives this time prophecy for Moses. You know who that is? Anybody here now? Who's the prophet that's identifying Moses? Abraham. I did hear you, my brother. I was waiting for someone else to. So Abraham is going to give a time prophecy, and he gives more than one time prophecy. In fact, he gives a time prophecy and he gives a second prophecy. So he's going to mark when the Saviour is going to be born. So you have this same pattern over and over again. No time, then a time. There's no time, then a time. And here we come here. This message from Daniel. Daniel doesn't only do the 70 weeks. He's done another one, remember, Daniel 8:14, which is 2,300. Now this one caused people a lot of problems as well. They had the same issue. They don't know when the start date is. They've got all these problems that are going on. And so here we are in the time of Christ. Christ has died. Here Stephen has been stoned. And here is Paul. So Paul's here. Paul's the apostle to the prophets, to the Gentiles, prophet to the Gentiles, and he's got a controversy with the Thessalonians, because the Thessalonians believe that Christ is going to come right now in their time, in their lifetime, and he says, "Don't be deceived." There's always deception in the church. Always deception in the church. He says, "Don't be deceived, because Christ isn't about to come anytime soon." And something has to happen before Christ can come. So he's going to lead him into the future, and he says that the man of sin has to be revealed. Then the Messiah can come. Then he's going to come after the man of sin is being revealed. And he doesn't give any time prophecy for that, because he doesn't need to. Because there's already a time prophecy that's given. Who gave that time prophecy? Daniel. Chapter... that was the Daniel 9:1 here. That was projected into the future. Daniel 11.
Somewhere between 1 and 12. I think.
Daniel 8.
Daniel 9.
14. Daniel 8:14. Daniel 8:14. So here's this prophecy that's going to run all the way through here, and after the man of sin is revealed. And we were right with Daniel 7, by the way, because Daniel 7 takes you to the same place. So this would be 1798, and then 46 years later, in 1844, what happens? Christ does what? Comes on the cloud. We read that in Matthew, remember? So here's this cloud that comes, but he doesn't come to earth. But he certainly goes to the sanctuary. He goes from the holy place to the most holy place. Daniel 7. So here's the fulfillment of this prophecy. So Paul is teaching what message? Not a trick. What's he teaching? Can he be teaching one message? Can he be teaching one message?
Everlasting gospel.
The everlasting gospel. He's teaching the everlasting gospel. And the question is, everybody's asking, when? And he says, I don't know. All I know is after the man of sin has come. So here is this message that's running through time, and then suddenly, here you come in 1798, and you get Revelation 14 verse 7. And what does it say? Revelation 14 verses 6 and 7. It says, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel. So here's the everlasting gospel, the gospel that Paul's preaching. But now what does he say? He says, saying with a loud voice, fear God, and give him glory. Why? Because the hour of his judgment is come. So what's that saying? Now we know the answer to the question, when? So here we have the issue of time being brought to view, and he answers the when. So that was the answer to the question. It says the hour has come. So can you see this recurring theme all the way through history? What's the constant? The everlasting gospel. The everlasting gospel is the constant all the way through. You don't know when, then it gets answered. You don't know when, then it gets answered. You don't know when, then it gets answered. So what happened? What's happening in 1798? What's being given in 1798? The everlasting gospel, but now it's connected to what? Time. Because it's telling you when. It says the hour has come. When Christ is baptized here in 27, he says the time is fulfilled. The time is here. What time is here when Jesus says that? It's the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9. And here you get the same situation. This is talking about the 2300 days. The hour has come for the 2300 days to be fulfilled. So when you get these histories here, so there's one here, there's one here, and there's one here. So we've got Moses, Christ, and Millerite history. When you have these histories, what are they dealing with? They're all dealing with the everlasting gospel. That's easy to see. But they're answering a question that everybody's been asking in the generations before. And what they've been asking? When's it going to happen? When is this thing that you've been going on for so long about going to happen? And the answer is, what's the answer? The hour of his judgment is come. What does that mean? Is come. Present tense. It's here. As soon as you get to this thing, it bursts upon the scene and says, by the way, in case you didn't know, it's already here. And it catches everybody by surprise. Because no one really knows the exact timing. Because they don't know if it's 0 BC or 27 BC or when he's 12. Who knows when it's going to be? Could they have known? Could they have known? Of course they could. Of course they could have known. Did everybody know when Jesus was born?
No.
They do, because the Magi have come. The shepherds have given their message. Everybody knows what's happening. They knew what year that was. And Jesus is what? What's his job function when he comes to earth? He becomes a high priest. And we might not know today because we don't know our Old Testament history, but they knew it very well. If you want to be a priest, you know how old you have to be a priest? You have to be 30 years old to be a priest. It tells you in the scriptures you have to be 30. You can't officiate before 30. So they could calculate. They could have known when it was all going to happen. That's why John the Baptist begins his ministry then when he becomes 30. So they could have calculated. All this information is there, but they're not looking, they're not reading. And that's much of our problems. We're not reading. And even if we do read, we read and miss. It means we don't actually understand what we're reading. So there's this constant theme about the question of the everlasting gospel is running through, and you get these distinct periods when it says, it's being fulfilled now, it's being fulfilled now, and it's being fulfilled now. Now at the end of the world, all of this is all fine, because we don't live in the time of Moses, or the time of Christ, or the time of the Millerites, do we? Do we live in those time periods? Well, kind of. Yeah, because it says all these things were written. Why? Some of us think so we can go get bored and, teach our children stories. No, that's not why. They were written for our admonition. They were in samples. And in samples isn't just some archaic word for example. It actually means something specific. An ensample means a repeating pattern over and over again. And it's not just any kind of repeating pattern. What an ensample is, I don't know, has anybody done, do you do metal work when you went to school? When you were at school, some of the boys might have, I don't know, some of the men might have done that.
And the girls.
Yes.
I didn't, yes, I didn't know what it's like. So if you did metal work, 14 to 16 years, so on the workbench, when I was doing it, we used to get this leather bag or leather sack, which is full of sand. And you used to put it over the bench and form it into this shape, and then you've got a nice copper plate, and you used to anneal the plate to make it soft, and then you got a mallet, and if you did it well, it looked beautiful. You'd get this sheet, put it over the top, and then you'd start banging it. And you'd bang a pattern into this sheet, and it would mould itself over this this mould, and you'd end up with a dish that looked like this, like a plate basically, or a saucer. And this, and the beauty of this plate would be that if you looked at it, it would have all these little facets on it. Each time you beat it, every time you beat it, it'd have a little dip in it, a little flat, and it had this beautiful effect. That's what an ensample is. It's to do with beating a repeating pattern into a metal sheet. And this issue about beating into this metal sheet has a lot of symbology built into it, but the easiest one is the Lord's trying to just knock some sense into us. You know, he really is. He's trying to bash us with this hammer over and over again until he knocks some sense into us. Because that's what these ensamples are, and you know, we really don't seem to get it. We're living at the end of the world, and what's our message? The everlasting gospel is the same one that's going all the way through, but the words are different. It's not Moses, it's not Christ, it's not Millerites. It's the story that we're living in here, and I'll put the symbol for us, the 144,000. Or the final, which means the last generation. This is who this is being targeted at, but it's the same one. And since 1844, what has this church been teaching? What have we been? What are we supposed to be teaching? What's coming?
Second coming.
Before the second coming. What's in our name? Seventh-day Adventist.
Yes. Sunday law.
Sunday law, right from here. We're supposed to be, the purpose for our lives was to be the custodians and the guardians of the Sabbath and to warn about the Sunday law. And this is the point that I didn't make clear. The point of the message is this. Our everlasting gospel message is around the framework of the Sunday law. It's not the framework of Moses leaving Egypt. It's not the framework of Christ where he wants his people to get their lives straightened out. It's not the story of the Millerites when they're coming out of this 1260 years of papal persecution. Our message is the Sunday law. This is our everlasting gospel message. But there's a problem with our gospel message. What's the problem?
Can't do time anymore.
Everybody's saying when.
No.
And our answer is, we have no idea.
Yeah.
And everybody says, well, we don't believe you because you've been going on this for a long time. You've been crying wolf for over 170 years, and that's all you Adventists go on about. But there's no Sunday law coming. In fact, everything's getting better and better.
Yeah.
Little glitch here and there. First World War, Second World War. Only a few, but we're getting better. So there's not going to be any Sunday law. It just can't happen because nobody believes it. So,
Even Adventists.
Yeah.
and why would we? Why would we believe it? Because we don't have the tools to understand Scripture. Let me rephrase that. We do have the tools, but we haven't been taught how to use them properly because we don't understand about these ensamples and this knocking sense into us because we don't understand how to use our tools properly. We don't believe it. You know, sometimes I think we're too hard on Adventists. I am an Adventist, but I was going to say this. If I were an Adventist, which is a silly way of saying it, if I were an Adventist, I wouldn't believe it either. Because how do you know it's true? I mean, okay, because Ellen White says. I understand that. I understand the logic behind it. But it's not much to go on. You know, for a reasonable, rational thinking person. And even if we do believe it, because this is where it gets interesting. Because a lot of people don't believe it, but even if you do, because I'm a good Adventist, I say, okay, I believe it because Ellen White says it. So what's going to happen is that I can't see anything. So I'm going to keep on occupying till he comes.
Mm.
And to me, occupying says, get an education,
Mm.
get a good job, get a nice house,
Yeah.
and a reliable car, and
A nice wife.
a nice wife, take care of my family.
Yeah.
Occupy. That's what we're supposed to do. Occupy till he comes. And then when it comes, then I'll deal with the mess. So, the Sunday law.
Yes.
And that's how the other half of Advent is. Regardless, you don't believe it's going to happen because you've just lost faith, because that's what your granddad told you. And how many Adventists have ruined their lives not getting on? You know, how many stories have you heard about my great granddad lost all of his money because he got duped into some Adventist projects and it never came to fruition because they said Jesus was about to come and lost all of his money and that was all a waste of time. So, you know, we don't want to get into any of that kind of foolishness. Or we say, we'll occupy till it comes and then we'll deal with the mess. So that's our situation. We've got this gospel message when. But if we can see, and I've just given you three, there are more than three. There are more than three. Moses, Christ, the Millerites, and all of them are dealing with this issue here. Here we have the answer. Here we have the answer. And here we had the answer. So I've given you three examples. The Bible says upon the testimony of two or three, something is established. So when you've got the everlasting gospel, and the question is always when, and it gets answered, when, and it gets answered, when, and it gets answered. When people ridicule Adventists, when we ridicule ourselves about this everlasting gospel message, about the Sunday law, and we say, when's it going to happen? We should be expecting an answer that deals with the when. And I want to remind you, God is so kind to us. Our period between starting the question when and getting an answer, I'm pretty sure, I'll say it is, it's the shortest of all of these. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's the shortest of all of these. It may not be the shortest out of all the stories, but out of the ones I've selected, it's the shortest one. It's only 100 plus years, 170 years, less than 200 years. Some of these go for a very, very long time. You know, this one goes from Adam all the way to Moses, or to Abraham, and that's well over 2,000 years. Well over 2,000 years, that is. And this one's only 200 years, so it's only a tenth. So God's not even asking that much of us to keep our faith firm. But what I want to show you is this. This answer, here's this history here. I'll put it in here. 1, 2, 3. And what am I going to put here?
1, 2, 3.
It has to be the same. 1, 2, 3.
So we do know the answer.
We do know the answer. So the question is, when does the answer come? Does it come at 1, at 2, or at 3? That's the thing we want to get clear. When does it come?
Comes at 1.
Comes at 1. That's, because if it came at 2, you'd already missed number 1. If it came at 2, you say, when did 1 happen? I didn't see that. It has to come at 1. So it's here at number 1. At number 1. And at number 1. Now this gets easy. When's our answer going to come?
Number 1.
Number 1. I mean, it's this is difficult.
But when is 1?
All that Brother Patrick needs to do now, because I'm not doing this. He needs to show you what mark number 1 here, what mark number 1 here, what mark number 1 here. If he shows you all the number 1s, you'll have 3 stories that tell you about number 1. All you have to do is get all of those 3 stories, combine them together, and you'll get all the bits of information that you need to work out number 1. What I want to tell you is, where are we living today? In 2016. I want to tell you already, number 1 is long gone and past. It's already gone. And you didn't realise it. But there's still time. There's still time. There's still hope for all of us. But number 1 is already gone. And number 1, the answer is already, which is good. And the reason it's good is because you're coming at the right time. Because if number 1 was in the future, you might not be sure. But now, we're saying we've got number one, number one, number one, and we're going to show you all the characteristics of number one here, and we're going to give you the event, when it happened, all the details of it, and you're going to see it fits. So you can have confidence. You can be sure that when 2 and 3 hit, they're going to be in agreement with what we're teaching, because we've already going to show you number one is correct, and we've got a lot of history about this. Now, if number one was in the future, and we were standing here, then it might be guesswork. Because you well, how do you know number one's going to be correct? What is this thing going to happen, this event? But if number one's already happened,
We're waiting for number 2.
and so if you already know number one has happened, and you agree that it all seems to fit, then we're in a good position. So you've come in at the right time. Don't think it's too late. That's the point I want us to see. So our story is about 1, 2, and 3, and it's dealing with this last and final generation. We've already passed number 1, and we're coming into number 2, and we're rapidly headed into number 3. And number 3 is the Sunday law. Because you've got judgment. This is when judgments come. So there's one more little piece of information that we'll give us. I'll give that tomorrow, and then once we've got that laid out, then we're gonna jump into our notes. The reason why I spent a little bit of time going through this, so you can understand this 1, 2, and 3, is because all my notes are dealing with number 3. My notes deal with step number 3, not step number 1 or number 2. And I wanted us to see there's these 3 steps. They're recurring. Brother Patrick's going to go into all of these details and histories and expand them out and show you that information. But my focus is going to be on number 3. So there's only one small piece of more information that I want to do, so you get the concept of how this modelling works. And then we're going to go into the details of number 3. Hopefully by that time, which will be 4 presentations of Brother Patrick, you'll begin to become familiar with the terminology that we're using, the methodology that we're using. By the time I start talking tomorrow afternoon about step number 3, so we'll spend about 20 minutes tomorrow. We'll recap what I've already said, give you a little bit more information about these 3 steps, and then I'm going to go into the 3rd step. So, do we want to break, or do we want to go straight into question and answer?
Question and answer.
We'll go straight to question and answer?
Oh, you did. Oh, sorry, that's for tonight. We'll
Sorry?
ask the question now.
Oh, we can ask it. Yeah, but it is tonight. That's what I'm asking.
Oh.
It is tonight.
It's 6 o'clock.
So it's already 6.
At the time.
Yeah. We started a little bit late, and I went 5 minutes over. Sorry?
Some people. Maybe if we had it now, I'm not sure communicating. I'm not sure about our communication here.
Oh, you can just speak out loud. Just tell me what.
Sandy May has to go.
Okay, so
But if we had it now, maybe she may stay for a little bit. I said it's not about me.
Christ,
Yeah,
it is Christ is always looking at the individual. So I'm happy just to go straight into question and answer. We're running a little bit late anyway. Yeah.
Yep, yes.
Great.
Anyone against? Say aye.
So, did we get any written questions? I didn't receive any. No. Okay. So, no, don't worry. So, just put your hands up or shout out, and you can ask either Brother Patrick or myself.
It's number 1.
Any questions? Any questions you want to address? If there's no questions, then we'll do it anyway.
Yeah. Something,
Okay.
nothing to do with any of this.
Okay. Oh, then it gets difficult.
The sun of righteousness, the sun, morning star, and the day star.
Talk louder. Son of righteousness,
Sometimes
morning
it's Christ,
star.
sometimes it's Satan.
They can't hear you down there.
Okay.
Correct.
Please explain.
The easiest way I can explain that is my brother's speaking about sun, which is a symbol,
Yeah.
can be Christ or Satan? That's your question?
Is it like the lion? Is
Yeah,
the
that was going to be my response. If I were to say to you,
The lion, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what is a lion?
Yeah.
So you have to
The
think
context.
about. I see you already knew it.
I
Oh,
know,
you should
yeah.
be answering the questions. It's
You
all to
didn't
do with
ask me.
context. Ah,
No, well, I know about the lion thing, but sometimes, you know.
it's all to
the
do with
sun-
context.
Yeah.
You have to understand the context to know what the symbol represents. And in your notes, and I normally forget to do this, but Patrick's really good at this. And going to the notes, I mean, there's a nice quote that Ellen White gives about affirming William Miller's rules of prophetic interpretation. He had 14 rules of interpretation, and one of them deals with the issue of context. Every word has to have its proper bearing upon the subject that you're dealing with. And if you get that wrong, you can get into a lot of mess. So it's all to do with the context of those verses, depending on whatever subject you're going to identify it as. And you know, the lion is at least 4. You've got Satan, you've got Christ, you've got Judah, you've got Babylon. So you've got the Assyrians. There's 5 days. So you've got different people that you need to identify. That was straightforward. Yes.
Sister White tells us to study Isaiah chapter 58. Is that coming to your...
Yes, Isaiah 58. There's a lot of information in Isaiah 58, but essentially people normally understand that to be the chapter that's dealing with the Sabbath. It's dealing with Sabbath and Sabbath reform. So
Which means it has to do with all those 3 things you mentioned before.
that's right. And most of the time when people deal with Isaiah 58, they deal with it at a moral level, like don't break Sabbath and
Doing
speak your own words. Don't speak your own words, speak Christ's words. But we would understand it on a prophetic level.
Yeah, feed the poor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then shall thou have health breaks.
And what we're saying is this: when it says speaking, don't speak your own words, speak the Lord's word.
Yeah.
Or it talks about feeding. I rubbed it off at the top here, but I'm gonna put it back here. Literal,
Yeah.
symbolic.
Yeah.
The way the church would understand this, and they're correct, we're not denying this, because they would go to Ellen White quotes that would explain Isaiah 58 in its literal setting. So we're not in opposition to that,
Yeah.
but our focus is a prophetic message. And when we're reading Isaiah 58, when it talks about speaking or talks about feeding, we're not talking about giving a hungry person a loaf of bread, you know, literally. We're going to identify them and understand these in a symbolic fashion. So what would you eat symbolically?
The word of God.
The Word of God. So here you've got the Word. And when it says speak, we remember we spoke about Christ, the Holy Spirit, the message, and human beings who are the messengers. So what would you be speaking? Would you be speaking not just your words on the Sabbath or Christ's words on the Sabbath? You know, like it says, don't talk about your worldly business in a moralistic sense. This is talking about a specific message that's dealing with the Sabbath issue that you're going to be speaking, because you're now a messenger. So the speaking is to do with a specific message which is connected to the Sabbath Sunday issue, which is the everlasting gospel. A nice place to see that, when you see the speaking and the feeding connected together, is in Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 2. Ezekiel chapter 2 is going to connect both of those things together. We could have gone to Revelation 10, it would have done the same thing, but we'll just go to Ezekiel chapter 2. And I'm going to pick up from verse 8. Ezekiel 2 verse 8. Ezekiel 2 verse 8 says, But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat that I give thee. So here's this feeding. Says this eating he's going to have. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. and he spread it before me. Let's count now. And it was written within and without, and there was written what? Lamentations, 1. Morning, 2.
And
Woe.
woe.
3. How many steps?
3.
3. So what's that?
The everlasting
So
gospel.
you know this is the everlasting gospel, that you're going to do what? Eat. So you have to feed on the everlasting gospel. Moreover, he said unto me, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and then do what? Go,
To the house.
Go and do what?
Speak.
go speak unto the house of Israel. So what's he supposed to speak to the house of Israel? What he's already
Eaten.
eaten. So what he's eaten is what he's going to speak. And in that everlasting gospel, is there anything good in there? Anything positive? Lamentations, mourning and woe. Anything positive?
No.
There's no positive words in that at all.
No.
It's all negative. Just to give you some history of where Ezekiel is. I think I mentioned this morning there are 3 prophets who were ministering at the same time. Remember who they were? Daniel,
Jeremiah,
Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. They're all together. Daniel's captive in the city of Babylon, in the palace. That's where he is. Jeremiah is in Jerusalem, or where? And all of this message, let me do a line here. Here, Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And they're going to go into Babylon here. And Ezekiel is right here. This is Ezekiel 2. And the Lord saying to him, you have a message to give to who? It says the rebellious house. And what's the message? What is the message that they have to accept? Lamentation, mourning and woe. Why? Because what's about to happen?
Destruction.
Yeah.
Jerusalem's about to be destroyed, and there's no turning back. There's no hope. If they repented now and they put all their sin away, they were still going to get destroyed. They've gone so far. There's no hope for recovery. The only hope of recovery is if you accept this and you turn onto the side of obedience and you become righteous as an individual. You're a wise virgin. You can be saved that way, but the whole nation is going to go under. And so he's giving this message here, foretelling the destruction that's about to happen. And that's what we're talking about in this same issue when we will address Isaiah 58 of those kind of passages. It's this everlasting gospel predicting what's about to happen. So that's what Ezekiel's doing here. What he eats is what he speaks. It's the everlasting gospel.
Hence you go to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and say, woe, woe, woe.
Hence you go to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and say, woe, woe, woe.
Yeah.
Which is right here. Woe, 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 Revelation 8, verse 13. Because there's a woe pronounced upon them, and it says woe in this chapter 2, verse 10. Lamentation, mourning and woe, and that woe is the same woe there, and it's not only destruction in a generic sense, it's the woe of radical Islam that's coming to bring destruction upon the world, and our church is going to be swept into this.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything on Isaiah 58? Hopefully that answers your question. We apply the passages symbolically. We fully recognise. If you go to Daniel 1, the health reform message, we don't argue. But Daniel chapter 1 has to be looked at symbolically. The food that he's eating, which is not on the king's table, he's not eating or drinking the food and wine of Babylon. Symbolically at the end of the world. This is a story about the end of the world. There are people, God's church, who are not going to partake of the wine of Babylon. You can partake of the wine of Babylon and not be part of Babylon. Do we know that?
Yes.
How many Jews got taken into the king's palace? There wasn't just 4 worthies. There were other noble sons who were taken into the court. And what are they eating? They're eating the king's food. And are they Babylonians?
No.
They're not. So you can eat and drink the food and wine of Babylon and still not be part of Babylon. So we're saying that our church, like those other people, are eating and drinking the food and wine of Babylon. We're partaking of their doctrines, but we're not Babylon. You don't need to be Babylon to do that. The definition of Babylon is if you keep Sunday and or if you have a wrong view on the state of the dead, you've entered into that kind of spiritualism in that unique, specific way, the issue of the state of the dead. They're the two pillars, or the two things that would turn you into Babylon. But there are many other doctrines that Babylonians have.
You know, in the verse 1 of Isaiah 58, blow the trumpet and show my people their transgressions, and the house of Israel their sins. In application to us today, who would those two groups be?
Isaiah 58 verse 1. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. So, there's a really beautiful technique that the Hebrew writers use consistently, and it's nice that my brother brought us to this verse, because it's a relatively straightforward one that we can identify this principle on. It's called repeat and enlarge. And the Hebrew writers do this hundreds of times, if not thousands, throughout the scriptures. They get a verse and they repeat and enlarge upon the statement that they made at the beginning of the verse, at the end of the verse. So here's verse 1, and it's in part A and then part B. So there's a statement at the beginning, and then it's part A and part B. So this is a statement. It says, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet. That's this first bit here. Then it says, show my people their transgressions. And so it says, show people transgression, break. Then it says, the house of Jacob their sins. House of Jacob their sins. So this is part A and this is part B. My sister, see you in the morning, hopefully. So part A and part B. So if this is repeat and enlarge, whatever you said here, you're repeating it and enlarging upon it here. And if I said a statement here, which was A, and I said B, and put it next to it, an easier way is to actually drop it down and put it like into a table. So I'm going to drop B and put it down under here. So it says, show the people, which means house of Jacob, their transgression, which means sin. So here you have this repeat and enlarge, and their direct equivalents. So the people are the house of Jacob, and what they're doing is sin. And so the other thing that we need to do when it says, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet. So there's a lot of symbology in there. It talks about cry with a loud voice, and it talks about a trumpet. All of this is the messenger who has a specific message. And when would he give this message? When?
To the church.
When?
Now.
Which number?
1.
Number 1. Number 1. You've got to show them your what? Show them the sin. The transgression. Sin is number 1. You have to show them the sin. Everybody's doing sin in the church. You have to show them that they're doing sin. And the way they're going to do it is what? They're going to cry with a loud voice with a trumpet. There's a trumpet. Now, I don't know if you can see here, but this angel's got a trumpet, and this angel's got a trumpet, and this one's got a trumpet. Now, the thing with this chart here is that the Millerites understood this history really well. The first jihad, the first woe. They understand this history very well. The second jihad, the second woe. The trumpet, the woe. The trumpet, the woe. This one they had trouble with because it's future to them. They knew it was a trumpet, but they didn't know what it looked like. So here's this trumpet that's being brought to view here. And we're going to cry with a loud voice that the trumpet's already here at stage number 1. And upon the testimony of 2, thing is established. 1 plus 2 equals 3. Just maths. 1 plus 2 equals 3. So here's the first woe, the second woe, and the third. What was the first woe? The Mohammedans, the Ottoman Empire, which were Muslims. So what's the third one going to be?
Muslims.
Same thing.
Something
This
totally
is-
different. That's what the
Yeah.
answer is.
He's actually.
Something totally different, because that's where you have to go.
Yeah.
What else can we say? So this trumpet is that trumpet that's being dealt with there, which is the third woe, and it must be, as my brother says, something totally different. We could never guess what it possibly could be.
That's the answer they give. And then they say, the other one that troubleth Israel, because you're telling them the woe. And
Yes.
blowing the trumpet. And then they go, you're in
We're a
Troubler.
troubler in Israel.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're a troubler in Israel, what's your name?
Elijah.
Oh, Jacob.
Elijah. Sorry?
Jacob, even.
The troubler in Israel.
Oh, yes, Elijah.
Yeah.
Elijah.
Yes. Oh, yeah, the Elijah.
yes.
That's what you get accused
The
of.
Elijah message.
So I don't know how many sermons you've heard or presentations by all these conservative speakers about the Elijah message.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this and I didn't. This shows you what the Elijah message is. It's something that's you're going to cry with a loud voice that's dealing with the trumpet. This is the seventh trumpet, the third woe. And who would know what that's about? Yeah.
So what is the
Prophecy.
third one?
What is the third woe? What was the
Islam.
first woe?
Islam. Oh, Muhammad is.
Islam. Islam.
Islam again.
Radical Islam, which is the third thing that I said that the church rejects. If you reject the first and second, you don't know what they're talking about. You can't come to the third and understand it, which is the point my brother's making. When he says the third woe, and they're saying, we don't know what it is. The reason they don't know what it is, because when it comes to the first and the second, they've already rejected that history. They say, our pioneers were mistaken in their understanding of Revelation chapter 9, which is where that's being dealt with. They've made a mistake there. So now, they're blind to this ability to know what the third woe is. But if you know what 1 and 2 is, it's just simple maths. 1 plus 2 equals 3. The first woe and the second woe tell you about the third woe. If you don't know what that is, you can't do your calculation properly. And that's why we don't know what this woe is. And as you said correctly, we're the ones who are causing trouble. We spoke about this at lunchtime, didn't we? Some of us were there at lunch. That people say, well, the church is all against this message. You know, we understand that. And the reason it is because they're bad, because they're liberal, they don't have any standards. And you say, well, that's okay. But then people are talking about all these good, upright, righteous, independent ministries. And people were surprised when I said, well, by the way, they reject it, and they reject it, and they reject it. In fact, go anywhere in Adventism, on any spectrum, and everybody rejects it because this is the story of the scribes and the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The conservatives and the liberals are all against the disciples. They're all against them. This is a repeat of history, repeat of the story, the time of Christ. Whether you're conservative or whether you're liberal, you're going to war and fight against Christ and his disciples. So this is this issue. We really are causing a lot of trouble. Everybody identifies that we're troublemakers. Shouldn't come and listen to us. And they don't realise what they're saying by that statement. That if you're a troubler of Israel, you end up... Because what is Elijah's job? In the book of Malachi, what does it say? It says you're there to announce the great...
Day of the Lord.
Terrible day.
The terrible day of the Lord. That's
Here
right.
it is, the great and terrible day of the Lord, the Sunday law. That's Elijah's role, his job function. And we met him here in the time of Paul. We didn't go back to the story of Ahab and the original Elijah. We could have gone there. But you see that to identify as us as the troublers of Israel is in of itself fulfilling prophecy. Because in the time of Christ, who called him Elijah anyway? But before Jesus, they were saying, they were inferring that he was Elijah. Even the scribes and Pharisees, they said, are you Elijah? And he says, no, I'm not.
Yeah, they said, are you that prophet?
Yeah,
That's right.
because they knew that he fitted all the characteristics of causing trouble and being on his own and everyone's against him, and he's got this direct message about the fulfillment of the book of Daniel, they understand everything, and they're saying, "You that person?" He said, "No, I'm not that person," because they were asking in a wrong way a foolish question. And Jesus says, "Understand it correctly that he is." So if I said to you, we are the Elijah message, or if I said, "No, we're not the Elijah message," depending on who's asking the question. If they want to entrap you, we say, "Of course we're not. We're not Elijah. We're not claiming to be prophets." But Christ says that he was Elijah. If you accept it. If you accept his message, then he fulfills the role. It's all about a message, not about an individual human being. Their characteristics, what they behave like, if you like them, if you don't like them. It's about the message that they're giving. So I hope that answered the question to Isaiah chapter 58 verse 1. Those two groups. That was a good question.
So why is the jihads or anyone described as a scorpion, in Revelation 9? Because we've always known that, I've heard that the scorpions are the current Islam, the terrorists and whatever. So, yeah.
Brother Patrick's going to go into, we'll pick up one presentation on the role of Islam and identify it through prophecy. And he'll pick up that symbology that you brought, the scorpion, and explain what that means, and a lot more.
Okay. It's really in depth.
Is there no more questions? We'll close with prayer. One more question? An easy one.
Can you give more details? Because there's three testing messages that has been rejected, as you said, 25-20, the daily, and Islam. And they all connect to the Sabbath.
Yes.
And that means the Sabbath will be a test.
Yes.
And how do the daily then? Can you give some more?
How the daily relates to the Sabbath? I'm sure what your question with respect to the daily.
Yeah.
How does the daily relate to the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Okay, I can quickly do that. So the question was, we have the 25-20, and we have the daily, and we have Islam. And I'm saying all of them relate in some shape or form to the Sabbath. So the 25-20, there's at least 3 types of Sabbath that we need to deal with. We're experts on the 7th-day Sabbath, which we call Saturday. We understand all the ins and outs of that, how to keep it, when it starts, when it ends, all the intricacies of that. But there's another type of Sabbath, which is the ceremonial Sabbaths. These are the Sabbaths that are connected to the feast days during the year. And then there's a third type, which is called the yearly Sabbaths, which we'll go into a bit more detail when we tackle the 25-20. So these are the yearly Sabbaths that are brought to view in Leviticus 25. So that's why the 25-20 is connected to Sabbath. It's this issue here about the yearly Sabbath and how it impacts on 25-20. And then we'll look at the issue of the daily. So I'll do a quick timeline here. This is Daniel 12 verse 11. The year 508, the year 538, and the year 1798. I've given you 3 dates here. This is the deadly wound. I think we know about that. Napoleon gives the deadly wound. 538. This is the 1260. And I'm just going to pull back here a number of years. And I'm going to go to the year 321. This is Constantine. So this is a Roman emperor in 321 AD. 508, 538, 1798. So this is 30 years here. And there's a time prophecy in the book of Daniel that's 1290. But what I want to pick up is not the 1290 particularly, that's just an additional piece of information. It's this thought here, that in 321 AD, there's the Sunday law. Many Adventists aren't familiar that there was already a Sunday law in the year 321 AD. And some people who do know that one, they're not aware that there was another Sunday law here in the year 538. This was at the Catholic Church Convention in, I think it was Orleans in France. So there's a Sunday law in 538. So the daily is dealing with this issue here. Let's read the verse. It's Daniel 12 verse 11, so that I'll read it and then I'll make a comment on it. The wording's always a bit problematic. It says, verse 11, Daniel 12 verse 11, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there should be 1,290 days. So there's that 1290 days that we've set up. We've got the 1260 and the 30. So verse 11 says, from the time that the daily sacrifice, here's the daily. So here's the daily is taken away. And the rest of the verse says, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up. So here's set up. This is the abomination of desolation set up. Shall be 1290 days. So what's being brought to view here is that when the daily is taken away, 30 years later, then there's going to be a Sunday law when the abomination of desolation is set up. So let's put some names into this so that it makes some kind of historical sense.
So
This
30 years for the taking away of the daily.
No, this is the papacy. And the papacy is set up or established or placed. And in 508 there's the destruction of a nation called the Visigoths. It's a battle that's marked in 508. Once that battle occurs in 508, then, and so the daily is taken away, at a singular event here, it then takes just another 30 years for the papacy to be set up. And the papacy is the anti-what? The Antichrist. And what did we say Christ needed to be before he could begin ministering? He needed to be 30 years old. So it's not coincidence that when the papacy here in 508 is symbolically born, that he has to wait 30 years before he can be let me not put that crown, let me put his mitre crown for him. He's going to be crowned as a priest, and he's going to minister for 3.5 times. And then what's going to happen in 1798? He's going to be killed. He gets killed in 1798. That's the same story as Christ. Christ is born, then Christ is going to live for 30 years, then Christ is going to be baptized here when he's 30 years old. And how long does Christ minister for? For 3.5 years, then Christ is crucified. So you see this same pattern that the Antichrist must follow. So,
And you go back to 7.3 too, and get the other 1260.
yes. So, to answer your question, the taking away of the daily of 508 is connected to the Sabbath that comes in 538. And then Islam, the role of Islam is this. When the papacy makes a Sunday law in 538, Islam is there to punish Rome or the papacy. That's the role of radical Islam, is to punish when people make Sunday laws. So Islam is to do with the Sunday law, the daily is to do with the Sunday law, and the 2520 is to do with the Sunday law.
I mean, did the the Sunday law at 538. Did Islam have any involvement there, or
Involvement in the law itself.
no, in the punishment of that, or
Oh yes,
It's France.
they begin to punish the papacy from 606 when they come into existence.
yeah,
So they come into existence in 606 and they begin to punish Rome. But the problem is, Rome is impenetrable because Rome is being defended on the west by the seven horns and on the east by Constantinople. So the historical story of the collapse of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire is a story of prophecy where Islam is trying to punch its way through the army of Rome to get to the papacy. Which is why there's the warfare that we're in today. The reason why Islam is attacking the United States, because the United States is now the army of Rome at the end of the world. And its purpose is to take down the papacy. It even understands that. If you ask some of their imams and their people in there know, they know what it's about. They call the United States the Great Satan. Because they know it's the army of the papacy.
Yeah.
They understand that.
But Adventists can't.
But Adventists can't. Adventists can't. It's not a surprise that the Adventists can't understand it. If we have time, let me try and find the verse. In Zechariah chapter 4, verse 13, Zechariah 4:13. The angel says to Zechariah, and he said, "Knowest thou not what these be?" And he says, "No, my Lord." Adventists don't know anything.
It's almost like they're blinded in a sense, and there's probably an element of that, because it's like when the apostles said something to Christ about, well, why? In other words, why isn't it easier to understand all these things?
Yeah.
And he
If it
said,
was
well, if it were simple, even like everyone could understand it without actually having to make the effort to rely on the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? Like they could do it in their own strength. So the only way is if you actually are eating that little book and you're actually giving the Holy Spirit the opportunity to actually work and open your eyes to see the truth.
And you talk about opening the eyes. Revelation 3:18, it says, "And anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see."
Yeah, exactly.
We're
So,
blind,
yeah,
because
exactly.
we're laid to see.
No, I wasn't even thinking of that, but really, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Of course.
We're having some disagreements here.
Amen.
Gosh, that's
The three horns that were uprooted,
Yes.
the rise of the papacy. The 508, is that the date for the three horns? that
No.
were completely
No.
uprooted, or
508. 508's got nothing to do with that day. This is the Visigoths, and I can never remember. It's
the
the
Ostrogoths
Heruli,
and
the
Vandals,
Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. This is 538, 533, and this is
497.
I was going to say 4 something. Yeah, 497.
Yeah.
I'll check.
On the chart right there.
Why 497? Because Clovis has, because the Bible says
Parminder.
a host was given
On the
him,
chart. It's right there.
which is Clovis.
three on the
Clovis.
Yeah, I don't really use that one because I'm going to check my notes.
Is that the date that
It's slightly
Clovis came
different.
in?
That's why I'm saying that. Let me just check these dates first, and then I've got 493. I think it's 493.
Oh, that's when you were going through a whole lot of stuff.
When did Clovis come in?
Okay, so what's your question?
When did Clovis come in?
Okay, so what we want to make clear now. Some of this gets a bit. We're not now dealing on a superficial level. We're going into some depth.
Because
So I
those
might
three,
lose people.
That's all right.
So what I want to make clear is this: the three horns, they're not taken down by Clovis. These three horns are taken down by Eastern pagan Rome. None of the 7 horns do anything with taking down these 3. It's Constantinople that deals with all of these 3.
Justinian and Belisarius.
Not Justinian, because Justinian is dead by this. Belisarius deals with these 2. This is Justinian's dealing with.
Decree.
And the 493, it's the Ostrogoths that come and deal with the Heruli at the behest of the Romans. The Romans say, Ostrogoths, go and destroy them, and they do. So they take out these, and then the Vandals and the Ostrogoths are dealt with directly by Constantinople, 533. You can go into 4 as well, 538. But it's not Clovis. Clovis is going to be dealing here in 508 with the Visigoths, but that's not one of the 3 horns.
So how could that be that pagan Rome ends at 508, but it's still...
Pagan Rome doesn't end at 508. The issue of the daily has... Remember, a symbol can mean different things.
Yeah.
So the daily can mean pagan Rome, just as that empire.
Yeah.
It can mean paganism.
Yeah, because it does, because it includes Assyria and all those.
Yes, and it can also mean a title as well. It can also mean a title. So it has different symbology depending on the context. So here, when it says the daily is taken away, this is why it's a contested issue. Not just the day and the event. It's contested because the definition of the daily has now changed. It's not dealing with a concept. It's dealing with a specific nation, the Visigoths. It's not even dealing with pagan Rome. And that's why people have this problem with it, because the daily is now used in this context to be a pagan nation. So it can be a pagan nation, it can be a principle of paganism, it can be pagan Rome. It can have these different, same symbol, different meanings.
That's a few jigsaw pieces in my jigsaw puzzle.
Those 3 were in the way for the rise of the papacy.
That's right.
And what's the modern one?
The modern one
USA? USSR?
is the USSR, the USA, and the world.
That's right.
And we'll deal with them in some more depth as well. Shall we close it, Brett?
Yep.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your loving kindness and your watching over us, and your goodness towards your people. We ask now, Lord, that you would bless us, that you would be with us, shield us and strengthen us. Father, may the words that we've spoken touch the hearts of all those that are listening to it. Father, as I've repeated my own thoughts and ideas that you have shared with me this afternoon, my heart has also been touched and renewed. May each of us be committed to be faithful as we see history being repeated in these prophetic lines. Be with us and bless us, Father, as we end this first day of our Holy Convocation and as we rest this evening, and then please bless us as we're soon to enter into the sacred hours of the Sabbath, and may we honour the Sabbath hours both this evening and as we awake tomorrow. Please be with us and bless us. We're hoping for many things tomorrow, Father. Please speak to the hearts of those brothers and sisters that need to be here so that we might be blessed by their presence and they may be blessed with our fellowship. Be with us in all these things, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.